there.
Hi,
We are the
Dyslexia Duo.
Each week, we sit down with amazing people, including top researchers and experts in dyslexia, powerful advocates, affected individuals, and more.
Together, we break down the myths, share real stories, highlight research and strategies to advise our listeners about this prevalent learning disability.
Come join us. Hey, Melissa.
Hey, Aimee.
So, we're just always so excited to have this very special guest. When we saw her at ID8, I said, hey, you want to come back? She's like, sure, because you're my favorite podcast. And I don't know if I'm paraphrasing something.
I'm sure I said you're at least one of my absolute favorites.
Well, we
Which
know
would
that
be
there's a
true.
lot.
Which would
Yeah.
be true.
Yeah, there's a lot out there. We're so grateful that you're here
Of course.
to do this with us because we adore you. We know how much you put into everything you do, and we know your time is valuable. So we want to honor that too. And we really
Thank you.
appreciate you.
Thank you so much.
So, if you would go ahead and introduce yourself. And for those of our listeners who may be new to this whole thing, kind of tell them what you do and describe what you study and why it's important right now.
Okay, sure. I'm Maryanne Wolf, and I am the director of the Center for Dyslexia, Diverse Learners, and Social Justice. And I'm part of what is called the University of California, California State University Collaborative on Neuroscience, Diversity, and Learning. And in both of those, if you will, positions, they mean that I'm involved in all kinds of work on the study of reading. Now, as Aimee and Melissa know, and you, the audience, might not know, my field is developmental cognitive neuroscience. Each of those words is a mouthful, but it means that I study the development of the reading brain. And for many people, they think, oh, that begins between 5 and 6. But the reality is that that reading brain begins from the start, the very start, with how the young infant is processing the world through language and cognition and affect. So for those of you who don't know my books, I'll say that by way of introduction, the first book I wrote for the public is called Proust and the Squid, The Story and Science of the Reading Brain. And the first line I ever wrote for that is, the ideal reading begins under the crook of an arm. And by that, even though the editor wouldn't let me put it as the first sentence, it is the first part of the 4th chapter. And the reason why I say that as part of my introduction is that I'm looking at development in cognitive neuroscience from the very, very start. The cognitive part is the fact that reading is an invention. It doesn't exist in your brain. And so both in the book Proust and the Squid, and then my very last 2 books, Tales of Literacy for the 21st Century, and the one that I will talk about more today, Reader, Come Home, the reading brain in a digital world. And by this cognitive neuroscience label, I mean we use the reading brain and how it develops a circuit for an invention. Reading is not part of your genetic heritage. Language, vision, all those things are. No. The reading brain has to be taught and learned by the species. So the cognitive neuroscience part of what I do is to try to understand what the developing reading brain has. What are the parts, the processes that come together, and how can that knowledge inspire our teachers to do an even better job with every individual reader? Now, the last thing I'll say is that even though I write books and give podcasts like to Aimee and Melissa, my joy is to really ensure that everyone knows that literacy today, especially what I call deep reading, is intrinsically connected to the well-being of a society, the strength of a democracy, and the progress of our species. So the last thing I'll say is that, at least in my quote unquote short intro, is that I am really bent set on people understanding that deep reading, the deep form of reading, is what gives us our best shot at developing critical thinking, empathy, and insight by our youngest and oldest readers. And so that's who I am.
Well, we recently had Dr. Horvath on Jared Horvath,
Yes.
and he said, one, to tell you hello, because we told him that you were
Oh,
going to be on.
good.
And two,
I
we
just listened to his testimonial, in the
yeah,
hearings. He did a wonderful job. Please, you reciprocate and tell him I so appreciated what he said about the effect of digital technologies on the cognitive development of our young. He did a beautiful job.
it was eye-opening. I mean, your book, Reader Come Home, because I started bringing that up to him. He goes, oh, yeah, Dr. Wolf, we talked, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, I'm seeing more and more about how, because we are so multitasking with all the different screens, that it's hard to get to that. We're still sort of even surface reading. We're not getting to that
Yes.
deep comprehension that we need.
You're right, Aimee. And I know you have several questions about that you wanted to ask me.
I want to do it now.
And I'll just put it right in front of people, whether it's people like Horvath or Naomi Barron or Aimee. And the Europeans are really quite ahead of us on this. They've been studying this for quite a bit of time, and I've been part of their proposals, actually. What we are coming to grasp is that the technology that we once thought of as a tool is actually changing the brain itself. So it's not just what we read, but how we read that's changing the circuit of the child's brain and the adults as well. So what we know when we talk about reading being an invention by the species, that requires a new circuit. And a new circuit is not genetically programmed, which now, what difference does that make? It means that circuit's plastic. And if it's plastic, it's going to reflect the environment it's placed in. And the medium is part of that environment. So if you have a print medium, you're more likely to give more time to the deep reading processes. And we'll come back. I know Aimee and Melissa are very interested in that, and we'll go that. But I'm just going to give a quick overview as an introduction to that topic by saying that the medium, like print, gives more time to deep reading processes, while the medium of the screen gives less time because we're too distracted and we're in an evanescent medium. It doesn't exist. You can't hold it the way you can print. And the result is that you're more likely to be what I call a skimmer, getting the surface of information, but you don't go underneath that surface to really think critically about the truth, or, and this is really a tough topic, the misinformation, or worst of all, disinformation you are being given. So Dr. Horvath and all of these other great researchers were all bent set upon making the world realize, don't talk about technology as a tool only. It is a tool only when you are digitally wise. The reality is it's changing the interior consciousness and the circuitry of the brain itself.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
Absolutely.
That's pretty interesting because you talk about how it's changing the brain. And me personally, somebody who has been a good reader all of my life,
Yes.
I am not a good reader anymore. I don't feel like I
Yep.
am reading like I used to.
Yep.
And I 100% believe it's because I am doing a lot of reading on my
On the
phone,
screen.
on my screen. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm not picking up a book because when I do pick up a book, I have such a hard time staying focused.
It's
I can't
exactly
stay,
right.
I can't pay attention. I don't
Yes.
know, like I can't follow just the overall message very well.
Yes.
And this is not the way I used to read. So I'm like,
Not
what
not
is
at
wrong
all.
with me?
Not at all. Melissa, you are so honest and so typical of the current reader out there, because what you see is that you have become inured, or let's say you have trained the brain to go in faster, skimmer fashion. And the more time we're on the screen, and we're all 6 to 12 hours on a screen, the more we have a psychological set to be done, to go fast, to do multitasking. But it is meant that that changes our capacity for focus. Now, I will tell you, you're perfect, because you said you used to be a really good reader, and now you judge yourself as being not. Well, you are correct in both instances. You once were a true, what I call a good reader, but now, because you have spent so much time, you have developed a mode of reading that bleeds over into the reading of the books we no longer read. And the statistics are out there. We have an absolute crisis in how many people, and when I mean people, I mean even high school students no longer read, or no longer are asked to read books. I have, in the last 2 weeks, been giving talks to all kinds of countries, Korea, Brazil. This, just a few days ago, I spoke to Boston University. My daughter-in-law teaches at Yale, and all of them have a similar lament. Our students are no longer capable of reading a book, and so they don't. They don't have the focus. They don't have the powers of what I call cognitive patience to really
Like that.
focus in, attend to the details that absorb you. And when you said you were a good reader, you were. Melissa, you were probably a great reader, but this is the narrative that's out there now. Our college students tell us when they walk in freshmen that they never read a book. At Yale, I mean, I thought, okay, maybe there are some places, that just didn't require that. But at Yale, the majority of students said they didn't have to read a book in high school. They read short stories, they read excerpts, but they had not had the experience of picking up, and you can see this, no one in the, but these are all books. I begin every day with a book that causes me to center, slow down, and keep my cognitive patience alive. Maybe not well. In Reader Come Home, I admitted I could no longer read this, one of my favorite books. I couldn't do it. And I had to retrain myself for 2 weeks of reading at the pace of the author and the book. I had to slow myself down, hold the book, and 20 minutes a night for 2 weeks. That was what it took me to finally come back to what I call the reading home. And that's
Okay.
part of what the book is. Reader, come home. Come home.
I had a couple of thoughts and I was writing them down as you were speaking. So I read a study or a report a while back about how young parents are not reading to their young children
Yes.
anymore because
Yes.
they said it was boring.
Yes.
You know,
Exactly. It's horrible. This is so horrible. The fact is that the more we read to our children, the better they are themselves at becoming readers. And parents don't realize that. And I am so thrilled that I have a grandchild now who's a book baby.
Oh,
She
girl.
literally, now, this is an anecdote, but it was very instructive. She's 18 months old. I
Oh.
had a little, one of those darling little books, and has all these creatures in it, and one of the creatures was a caterpillar. She went like this, and she got up. She literally got up while I'm still trying to read this book. She got up, went to her own little bookshelf, and pulled out a very hungry caterpillar.
She
And
made
I
that
thought,
connection.
isn't that amazing
Nice.
that this 18-month-old had already started connections among books? And
Wow.
what she was learning in one was being generalized to another. And I'm like, this is not a child who's precocious. You know, I would say, oh, my grandchild's. No, she's not. She's just wonderful. She's just plain wonderful. And she's typical. She may even have a few less words. She's more motorically active than verbally active. But cognitively, she's making these connections, which is what every parent should be trying to do. In addition, perhaps the most important thing you do as a parent is associate love, affection, caring, the feeling of being safe and loved with a book. And for those of us, like myself, who study dyslexia, one of my colleagues once, when we had a clinic at Tufts in Boston, once said, do you know, the kids who come in here who are dyslexic and who have had a background, a history in their home of being read to, have such a better chance at learning more easily because they already love books. They already know books. And so, for as many reasons as there are children, our parents should read. It gives language, it gives cognition, and it gives love.
So I have a question about that too. So talking about being maybe a not as great reader, and or so many of our current dyslexic students, we know that the percentage of one of their parents having dyslexia
Absolutely,
is
genetics.
high.
Yes.
So what do you recommend for those parents that maybe don't feel comfortable reading themselves? What should they do? Could they be more comfortable maybe reading a lower level book with their child? Is that really good? Like if they are, say, for example, 8 years old and they're trying to read, instead of reading a second grade level passage, maybe going back down and reading something a little bit easier. Do you think that that's still good? Like you're not challenging their vocabulary, or
Right, right. Melissa, I think I happen to have a case study in my life.
Oh,
ah,
And the reason is that, just as you said, genetics is part of a lot of the individuals who have dyslexia, have children who have dyslexia. And my first son, Ben, is dyslexic. And
oh yeah.
he's the father of my first grandchild. And he is reading every day. Now, he has some favorites, and she wants him to read Good Night, Moon.
Oh,
And what I would say to every parent who's dyslexic, the majority of individuals with dyslexia can absolutely read all these early levels when reading is so important to the child. And there's another piece of your question. What if they're bilingual and they don't speak English and they don't know how to read in English? Read it in Spanish. Read it in Korean. Read it in Chinese. It's the idea of giving the child the home language, whatever it is. Now, in my case, Ben is an English speaker, but they have the most amazing young woman from Argentina who speaks Spanish and who lives in the home. And she reads in Spanish, and Ben reads in English. And maybe Anulata, her name, is
oh.
slower to learn vocabulary because she's learning actually words in both languages, which is just fine. But she has developed a love of hearing books read to her. And that's what I would say to every dyslexic parent. Just like Ben, he reads absolutely every day to his child so that he's a participant in the book baby development. And that's in place of absolutely no screens except, of course, FaceTime,
Right.
and it's never that you want to say that they are not ever to see technology. That would be ridiculous. We are in a world in which it's there, but it is not used by her in an iPad situation ever until she's a little older. And that research, oh my God, we can go into that research. Right or wrong, those predictions I made in Reader Come Home are now right. At the time, I was predicting based on what the reading brain is like, but now I can say the research has proven it correctly, just as Dr. Horvath has said.
So part of me wonders, and again, this isn't on our list of questions, but part of me wonders, why are schools persisting in like everything being digital? Are their textbooks, their books in the library, even that they can do?
Yes.
It's just they're insisting. And part of me thinks, I mean, you heard Melissa say, I don't read as well as I did because we're so inundated with
Yes.
that.
Yes.
But our kids never had a chance.
That's right.
All they ever got was tech, you know.
And there are those people who, in fact, have been writing me saying that COVID already proved to us how negligible the gains are with EdTech. And that's not all aspects. There are good aspects of
It's a good
EdTech.
part.
And the last thing I'd ever want to say, especially in the age of UDL, and my former colleague David Rose, who was the creator of UDL, or Universal Design, so just in case people don't know. But what you really are seeing is the misuse of technology rather than the wise use. For example, in dyslexia, as all of you know, I have long created a program, Ravo, that I have redesigned. And in the redesign, it has two parts. All the teacher's materials are totally organized. The flaw of Ravo before was it had so many moving parts. It was too hard to organize for a teacher. And the content itself, the sequence of objectives, all that was completely right because it's based on the reading brain. But it was too hard for a teacher to pull together before teaching. Now, so what we did was we made a truly hybrid approach. Teacher can differentiate her learning based on just go to the differentiation guide if she is a student who's not learning in the same way using the normal Ravo materials. But the child has all print materials in front of them. The books are in print. To do handwriting is really important to us. Writing, etc., is very important to us. All that's on printed materials so that we have the ability to still have the child learn to read with print while the teacher can teach and have everything very quickly there for him or her. But, the reality is, I'll just give you one example. This year, this fall, I was asked to come to Korea, and they have a absolutely amazing emphasis on education. But one of the reasons why they wanted me there was because they are wanting to digitize all materials from third grade up. And I'm telling them, no, this is the antithesis. Look at Sweden, look at Norway. Sweden digitized everything in the library, and then their academic performance was going down. Norway calls me up. Here, this kind of funny. In football teams, I don't know, I'm thinking Notre Dame and Purdue, or any two, are here in LA, the Bruins, UCLA, and the USC. I mean, it's like this animosity. Well, Norway and Sweden have that relationship. And so Norway, their legislature calls me up to testify and say, we don't want to be like Sweden. And I thought, oh, that's great because you shouldn't. But I said, but you can learn from their mistakes just as Sweden has learned. They've gone back to books. But they first, thinking they're ahead, they, digitized all their library books, and then they saw the grades suffer. And Norway saying, we don't want to do that. Well, the United States is dominated by technology. And, I'm the last to say technology is bad. It is not bad, but it must be carefully and wisely used. and it's not. And you can just imagine the glitter and glamour of the district superintendent who has the best motivation in the world, but they're confronted by these glamorous sales pitches that say, we're going to make sure every child has exactly what they need. It sounds great, but guess who's better at doing that? A human. And guess who's better at motivating? A human. Now,
Mhm.
that is not to say that technology can't and should be used to complement, supplement. In our Ravo program, as you might remember, years ago we had what was called Speed Wizards, which was a game that increases orthographic pattern recognition. The new one is going to have a whole new, uh, only slightly more beautiful, because we actually don't think you need all those bells and whistles, but it's better than our 20-year-ago game. But it's a game that increases fluency at the orthographic pattern recognition level. Bravo! We can do that. We can use, and there are good programs in technology that use it wisely. There's a word builder for older kids. There's a program, a Rally Reader. There's an avatar-based program in Bookalicious. There's all kinds of good uses. I don't want to take that away, but I want to say, first, learn to read with print and have examples of books and things to hold on to.
Absolutely.
And now a word from our sponsor.
Hey, Melissa.
Hey, Aimee.
So let's talk about who we met at IDA, Tumbleweed.
Oh, I love Tumbleweed's decodable books, and they're for striving readers in grades 2 through 6. My favorite thing about them, in addition to the storylines, is the inclusion of comprehension, spelling, and vocabulary activities.
Yes, and there's no guessing because they took out the visual distractions. They still have illustrations, but not right next to the print.
And Tumbleweed is easy to implement with any core or intervention program. Their teacher guides are jam-packed with multimodal approaches.
Check them out at tumbleweedpublishing.com. Hi, this is Aimee Rodenroth, and as part of the Dyslexia Duo podcast team and owner of Discovery Dyslexia Services, I want to talk to you about my business. Our COUT-trained team offers expert virtual or in-person therapy located in Prosper, Texas, using proven dyslexia curricula like Take Flight, Build, MTA, alphabetic phonics, and reading by design. We also provide crucial independent evaluations and advocacy services. Don't wait. Empower your child today. Visit www.discovereed.com to learn more. That again is www.discovereed.com. Discovereed, covering all your dyslexia needs. Let's return to the show.
So thinking about the reading brain versus the non-reading brain. Okay, I got to figure this out from you. What are the core components of the reading brain? So we've got to know that in order to be able to help them, right? So what are those core components and how do they differ?
I'm so glad you asked, Melissa, because it's good to be very specific and concrete about this as we are in our research. As the two of you know, but your audience will not, we have had 2 decades of work funded by the National Institute for Child Health and Human Development, in which we took a very hard look at what are the component processes of the reading brain, and can we build interventions and instructional emphases based on that, and then test that against either a typical classroom, whatever they're using, or at what I would call a good phonics-based program. So what we found is that if you look at the major components of the reading brain, you will end up with processes that we then collapse into an acronym, Possum. Now, we use Possum as a way for the teacher to realize that every single day, instead of just teaching phonics or phonemes, you are always teaching phonology and orthography together with semantic activation, semantics. Now, don't just use the word vocabulary. Vocabulary often is just a list of words that you spell or you get to know at the end of the week on Friday. No. We want the semantic activation, the work on what is a word, how do you use a word, what are the different meanings of the same word, like bat. Can a bat with a bat? You are teaching flexibility, you're teaching polysemy, meaning many words having many meanings. I think you might know that I have a character named Ms. Mim. She's a spider who I hope looks a little bit like Bette Midler, because that was the inspiration. And Ms. Mim stands for many interesting meanings. Well, the reading brain has to have the meaning of the word for it ultimately to be understood. So we connect phonics, phonemes, to orthographic patterns, to meaning. But we begin with meaning. I'm just doing the SSUM so you know it's possum. But the lessons actually begin with the S, the semantic activation of that brain for words. But back to possum, phonology, orthography, semantics, syntax. How does a word work in the structure of a sentence? We don't speak plant, dog, chair. No, we say the dog bit a plant and put it under the chair. We connect through syntax. And so we teach our words with phonics, with phonemes, synthetic phonics, analytic phonics, and then we are making sure those words are used in sentences. And those words are analyzed with morphemes. So morphemes are very, very important to us. So possum, Melissa, is a way of looking at the major multiple components of the reading brain as, now here's where I want everybody to think carefully with what I say. I'm going to say it slowly. Possum is an expanded understanding of foundational skills. Foundational skills are not ever taught only by themselves by us, but connected within the first day and second day with connected text. So it's science of reading, and that's expanded foundational skills being connected to the sentential context, the story. So it's science and story meet in the reading brain. And the minute you do that, you're going to add not just perceptual or visual and auditory, but you're adding all these oral language skills. Now think of this, that have been developing from infancy. All of it is coming together, and we who teach are helping the child connect all that oral language, the phonology, the possum skills, all of them are being connected, made fluent, and connected to text. That's what the reading brain teaches us. Now, very, very, very quickly, Reed Lyon at NICHD ensured that we who use cognitive neuroscience do work in intervention. And so our work, thanks to Reed Lyon and Peggy McCardle and Brett Miller, we did randomized control treatment studies, RCT, the big gold standard, the hardest to do. We proved that this multi-component approach, that's what we call it, that's the multiple components of the reading brain, that if you compare that to only one piece of possum, PO, the phonemes, the phonics, orthography, if you compare possum to PO, you get better gains across the board.
Wow.
Now, think of this. The same amount of time with phonics and phonemes, which means even more attention to those two, versus phonics and phonemes and orthography and semantics and syntax and morphology and connected text. That approach gives better decoding, comprehension, and semantic gains.
Wow.
Now, this is work done with Robin Morris and Maureen Lovett in Canada. They are two of the finest researchers, and we've been doing this work for, 20 years. So that's why I had to ultimately bring Ravo back, because it's a great example of multi-component intervention.
Does it take training for a teacher to go through?
Yeah, we have the same like anybody else. It's basically 1.5 days, 1 to 2 days of training. Some of it we do remotely because I really want them to come, if possible, with a knowledge of what this is before they then meet all these characters like Ms. Mim, or I have new characters and old characters in the new Ravo. And one of the best comments was, well, I've never liked reading. I don't like reading, but I really like Ravo. And I think, oh, God, they're having fun,
Yeah.
and this is it. We want fun. We want joy. Please, some of these, just constant repetition of the same thing over and over again, not just for 1 year, but for 3 years sometimes. We could do better. Those are great emphases. Anything that's really good phonics and fun, that's all good, but it should be connected with the rest of the brain.
So Possum isn't just for students that are struggling. It would be for all students,
It
right?
would be, it's
Yeah.
a multi-component instructional approach.
Right. It's for all students. Okay.
But we use it, if you will, more intentionally, because it helps us look at a student in terms of their strengths and weaknesses in a very targeted way. Oh, that child isn't just dyslexic. That child has an impoverished language background and has very little, semantic network stuff going on. So not only are we working on quote unquote reading, we're working on that aspect of language. And if they don't have semantic activation, or if they have a poor language background, it's going to cross semantics and syntax as well, and morphology usually. So by putting it all together, we're really able to be better targeters, if you will, of the areas of weakness. And here's what's I find really interesting. We can see, oh my gosh, they're fine in this area. So you put more emphasis on POM and not SS, or the opposite. So, this gets away from the almost inflexible use of only phonics and phonemes. So you always want to have monitoring. The kids change, but they change in different ways, different ages. And so this approach allows more flexibility and more, if you will, okay, they don't need so much of that. And instead of doing it over and over and over again, because in general it works, but we want to be more specific about how it works.
Wow. So, one of the things in the same area, science of reading, the pendulum, you hear about the reading wars and it
Oh,
one
absolutely.
way and swing the other way. And my biggest concern now about the science of reading is that it's going to be, I don't know, for lack of a better phrase, watered down, and you're going to start to see that pendulum go the other way, especially because we talked about this yesterday, Melissa, with some of those reports that are coming out. They're like, oh, they're doing the science of reading and they're not passing reading still. So should we go back the other way?
I totally understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
If you have a pendulum, it will swing. That's what happens. We got to get rid of the pendulum.
Yeah.
And that's why I've written a paper for the Schenker Institute, Albert Schenker Institute, and I'll send it to you so you can have
Love
it
that.
for your audience. And it's called Elbow Room, How the Reading Brain Teaches Us to Teach. And it really shows that the science needs to be larger than what's out there. And so it needs to be expanded, but it's inclusive of stories. And it also tells the people who have been doing balanced literacy, their whole language, you've got great areas of expertise,
Right.
but you've neglected the alphabetic principle. You've assumed the children will, through good stories, induce it. And that's not fair to about 40% of the kids. But if you learn this, you will be able to integrate it better with what you do know. So the paper is an attempt to mend some of that reading wars. We'll never end it, I don't think,
Yeah.
because people have a kind of cultish. I don't, I say that with all due respect to a teacher. A teacher needs to be able to feel that what they're doing is best. But I would just say that everyone in both camps can add to what they're doing, and that the reading brain
Right.
is not the answer to everything. There is no answer to everything, but it gives more flexibility and systematicity. It's really important to be systematic and explicit, but it's also important to be flexible and to be expansive. And that's where stories are so important. So this paper, I will send that to you with a
I would love
Substack by one or two teachers who are part of what the Schenker wants to do, which is to give this paper broadly to inspire thinking by our teachers. But I agree with you, Aimee. My biggest worry is that people will think the science of reading is only phonics and phonemes
Mhm.
and not realize the science. I'm part of that science. We've been given all this money to do interventions that show it should be more than just that. We've proven it. But again, there's what you said is even more problematic when people say they are aligned with the science of reading and they're doing a checklist, a little of this, a little of that, and it's not structured sufficiently, or it's overstructured
Right.
without any flexibility. And so there are no silver bullets, none.
No.
But science of reading has a better shot, much better than anything else, as long as we think about it in a more expansive way than's out there. Neither watered down nor too narrow. Both of
Right.
those will just lend themselves to people moving back, and moving back would be moving backwards.
Right. No, I agree. And we've talked about this, I think, before. And background knowledge and listening comprehension and everything
Absolutely.
and verbal expression can't be left behind. It all needs to be
Absolutely.
a part of it.
Aimee, that's why I invented the word possum. So you do not ever, ever neglect those extremely important language processes. And I think that the way science of reading has been interpreted falsely is that it's only one thing. That's just
Right.
not true. And
Yeah.
recently at IDA, where you were, Charles Hume, his whole
Yeah.
speech was reading is language. Well, I would say it's more than that. I think reading is language and cognition and affect.
Yeah.
It's all of those. And the circuit shows us that all those things are happening, and we neglect any of them at our peril for kids.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So I'm thinking about the difference between a dyslexic brain and a non-dyslexic brain. And I
Yes.
was thinking while you were speaking about, a dyslexic kid sitting in a classroom and somebody might not understand what dyslexia looks like. And of course,
Yes.
we are wanting to raise awareness as much as
Oh,
possible.
absolutely. Yeah.
What could a teacher know more about dyslexia? How is the dyslexic brain different? How does it learn different? What are some key things that somebody could take away from, like what kind of signs, symptoms, anything that we could help our
Okay.
listeners?
Thank you,
learn?
Melissa. Your questions are all so good and so helpful to various members of the audience listening. And with regard to dyslexia, I will say that the screeners that people have been developing in different states are very important for getting at early identification, not diagnosis, but early identification of risk. Now, if I were to say, give me 5 minutes only, or 10, I would say you have to have some understanding of three things. And that is, in some ways, it's a little bit of possum, but it's more than that. But it is based on the reading brain of every child having differences in its development. Okay, the first is, and everybody thinks of this first, but I'm going to quickly say it's not the only thing, and that is their awareness of the sound structure of the language. Their awareness that a word is made of sounds, and those sounds are represented by letters. This is Helen Keller at work. They may not know their sounds. They may not know that words have sounds, but that's a very important concept that will help us understand whether somehow the sound system, what we call the phoneme awareness of that child, that awareness of the individual sound parts, if you will, of language. Now, the phoneme is an abstract concept, but there's a reality to it in that we have sounds and words that kids can make when they say a word, and they can take the word apart according to those sounds as they develop phoneme awareness. So phoneme awareness is giving us one piece of the story. Do they have those individual sounds developing? Do we? They call it a representation in the brain of those individual phonemes. But remember, phoneme is an abstract concept. It's how they understand that a word is composed of that. Okay, that's number one. Number two is a test that I'm going to call the RAN test because that's the one that I created years and years ago with neurologist Martha Denkla. But whether you call it a RAN test or a naming speed test or a speed of word retrieval, you are talking about how fast can the brain put a visual symbol representation, whether it's an object, a color, a letter, or a number. Can they give me the word? Because that puts the vision and the linguistic system together. If either one or both are too slow, that will be shown in the index of RAN. Now, there are many RAN tests, copied us 1,000 times. We get almost no money ever from the 1,000 imitations. Everybody has their own RAN. Some of them are worse than others. I would, if possible, say the original RAN is the best because it was the most researched by us. And it has 50 stimuli, not this 5 or 12 or 36.
Yeah.
It should have 50. Why? Because these are on lines, 5 symbols, let's just say letters, 5 letters repeated 10 times in lines for a quota of 50. So you have 10, 10, 10, 10, right? By the time the child's on the 3rd line, you are beginning to tax the system.
Yes.
So if you only have 12 or 36, you may not get a really full picture of how that system is being taxed into a retrieval speed problem. So the second is a real test of what will be the basis of fluency in this reading brain circuit. Okay?
Is that just cognitive overload at that point when it
No.
becomes taxed?
It's really, well, I'm glad for the question. There is overload, but it's not just cognitive. It's the brain's ability to connect two systems. See, this is what people don't realize. In fact, one of the more typical RAN tasks by CTOP didn't understand because they thought RAN meant phonology and didn't realize when they create. Now they understand that it's both phonology and orthography. But, they didn't understand that in the beginning, and so they called it an analysis of phonemes. That's why it was under CTOP. But it was an unfortunate depiction because what it is vision and language and the speed with which the brain can put two things together. That's what is really going on. Now, that can mean a phonological difficulty caused it. It can mean even that a visual problem caused it. But the reality is that it's when you put the two together, that's really what the problem that kids have. And we've been able to, analyze exactly where the error is being caused in the brain, basically.
Wow.
We can find that, and it's in between one symbol to the next. In other words, it wasn't vision. Well, I don't want to go too deep here because I know we have a few minutes left. But the reality is RAN is the second major, if you will, index of symptoms for dyslexia. Now, then there are others, and people like Jason Yateman are looking at more the, if you will, the orthographic, the visual aspect to some of the tests. He has his own test called ROAR, but that my colleague Ola Ozernoff-Palchik, a former student, analyzed about 1,000 kids in kindergarten using a whole array of these kinds of tests. But what she finds is that you will have a small set of pure phoneme awareness, a slightly larger but small set of only RAN, a very sort of smaller set of orthographic that would be even smaller, but the largest is when you have both RAN and phonemes and sometimes something else. So you have multiple areas as the largest index of dyslexia.
Wow. 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 That's amazing.
So the third is orthographic mapping.
It would be, I wouldn't call it mapping because I think then you get into some of the people who call that one thing and others call it something else. I would just say more linked to orthography.
Okay.
That's what I'll say. But usually that's not by itself, it's with the others.
This is awesome. Thank you.
Yes, this is
Absolutely.
great. So I know we're getting close to finishing up. So I'm going to jump to just kind of some questions is what do you hope the next generation of researchers are going to prioritize?
Well, I will say that because we are living in an AI and digitally dominated world, that we must, with all seriousness, see what that is disrupting in the development of the reading process and where it can be of help. So a major, if you will, piece of research should be how can AI and digital technology be wisely used and wisely not used?
Yeah.
And it's both. So that's one thing. I would really like more work on intervention of the kind that we're doing with Ravo. I would love to be able to take it not just in its, it'll be 3 years of material. I'd love to have it go even further into what I call the deep reading processes, which is another area. I don't want to call comprehension only one thing. I want to have it understood as all kinds of combinations of sophisticated processes. You use the term background knowledge. Wexler has made a lot of emphasis on background knowledge. That's just one piece, but it has to be connected to inference. It has to be connected to empathy, cognitive and affective empathy. All of this has to be connected to critical thinking, and critical thinking has to be connected to insight and the contemplative function. So I really would love to have deep reading as a way of looking at multiple sophisticated processes that underlying what we call comprehension. So I would like a lot more differentiation of what comprehension includes. Of course, since I'm in brain science, I want to look at all of this. I just read the New York Times about music on the brain and how really music is just activating so many areas. I would love Ola Ozernoff-Palchik, Ani Patel, Kathy Moritz. They've all done work. I've done some of this work with them, but I just looked to them. What is the relationship between music and reading? We saw it beautifully in the young. Can we have much more in-depth work on how music is, in essence, aiding, especially rhythm, the development of reading, and instead of getting rid of music and art because they want more time for reading, realize that both of those have wonderful consequences for reading and numeracy. So
Interesting.
those are some of the areas.
That's interesting. I mean, the connections I was making with that, my mom had Alzheimer's. And one of the things they would do in the memory care, they would bring in musicians and they would sing the songs from their era. And my mom, who didn't remember who I was, would be singing along,
Exactly.
and it was a wonderful thing to see. And then to hear the connection with music and reading, I'm just excited about maybe hearing some more possibility with how that could activate the brain.
Well, I'll just tell you really fast The work, and this was written in a publication more than 10 years ago, first author Kathy Moritz in the journal Reading and Writing. And our group looked at a charter school in which the Suzuki method for kindergartners, they're studying music every day of the week. A charter school near there, same environmental, SES, all that, except they only had 1 day a week of, I can't remember the little songbook they used, or Dell. It was a double name, but it doesn't matter. They got it only once a week, and that wasn't trained, no training. At the end of first grade, the kids who had gotten music every day were significantly better in their reading.
Wow.
All the other things were the same, as much as one could control, but this was in Boston, and music was better. And then later, Ola and Ani Patel, a neuropsychologist at Tufts who studies music and the brain, has written a book on it, showed that it was rhythm that was the important ingredient. I thought it would be lyric, melody, all that. No. It was rhythm. And then you think, what is rhythm? But it is time. It's the time to move from one note to the next. What are phonemes inside a word? They are the retrieval of a sound to the next sound, the next sound, the next sound. So it was really rhythm was predicting actually a phonological, if you will, component of reading. And we just were thrilled to understand this. But it's one thing to understand it, it's another thing to see people just massively forgetting gym and music, thinking they're doing something good for the kids when they aren't looking at the whole of learning.
Yeah.
So
Right.
I agree.
If you could have a parent with a struggling student right now in this conversation, what would you like for them to hear from you?
I would say you will have many ups and downs because dyslexia is not only a cognitive and linguistic phenomenon, it's also a social, emotional one. And as I lived through the feelings of failure of my own son, despite his mother knowing what was going on, there was no ignorance in the family, but there was an inability to ensure that they didn't feel bad in their classroom. The first year, it was a beautiful, wonderful friend school, the best values in the world, but a teacher who basically didn't know anything but whole language like approaches. And that was the last thing he needed his first 2 years, and that's what he got. And it's more complicated than that, but the reality was the consequence was social emotional detritus. He really felt bad about himself.
Yeah.
And here I am. Actually, Ravo began after it was too late for him to have it. But I saw especially the need for more work on fluency for him. He was definitely a child who had fluency issues as well as, your more typical profile. And that's why we have a whole different version, if you will, conceptualization of fluency in our intervention. But he was the one who taught me that it's not just academic, it's so social, it's so emotional. And I will never forgive, ever, the parent who once said, because, they don't know anything, they said, well, X isn't the brightest penny in the car. And it's like, oh my God, the effect that had on him and his friends, who then thought if he can't read like them, he's not smart. Now, that is continuing to this day. And it's essential that that parent you're describing, Melissa, that parent knows that part of their job is to find the strengths and never let that child ever think they're anything but full of potential,
Right.
but the need for extra work. And that's a hard message, to be both buoying their spirits, keeping those spirits alive, but realistically saying, you've got strengths that will be better than anybody in the world in those areas, and you've got some tough stuff going on, and it's going to be work, but when you work, you're going to read. Absolutely. You are going to read. and together we're going to do it. And we're a team. And you want teachers who are teaching them like a team, like a coach, not ever just emphasizing only the weaknesses.
Wow.
Right. I love that.
amazing. That's
Now,
amazing.
this is Mama Wolf
Yeah.
talking.
Yeah. And you can tell Mama Wolf has that feeling
Mama
of,
Wolf is, she is going to fight the demons of disrespect of the dyslexic brain,
it
which
still
is
hurts you. It still hurts you inside.
still hurts.
obviously.
I'll never forget that. Forget or forgive that parent for the kind of insult you should, even if it were true.
Yeah.
The fact that it wasn't true is secondary. And yet people do that. And we as parents, we have to hold our kids to knowing that their best is great. And whatever it is, it can be horseback riding. I have a niece who is also dyslexic. And my God, she's much more dyslexic than my son. And she's a horse whisperer. I mean, she's won every darn contest or for horses
Wow.
and ponies in Indiana, but could she read? No.
Wow.
That doesn't change her amazing
No,
talent,
no.
skills.
But she had to have parents who were willing to go to those horse contests, those equine contests, and take her and give her the time. Parents of any neurodiverse child have more work and more love to give, and never let anybody take away from that.
I
I love that.
completely agree with that.
Yeah.
All right. We didn't send you these questions. They're lightning round questions, just one word answers from you. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. We can do this. Okay. So thinking about your book, Reader Come Home, I think I know the answer to this. Is this a warning or an invitation?
Both.
Oh, okay. So I don't know.
Both.
Okay.
How about biggest myth about the reading brain?
That it's not connected, that the processes aren't connected and can be taught in isolation, like a checklist.
Okay.
So what makes Possum different? Brain, heart, or both?
Everything that I hope for our kids is both.
Yeah, I do too.
Everything I always hope for.
Okay. If you could redesign literacy education tomorrow, what is the first change?
What I wanted.
Read my Shanker paper.
I wrote it down. I know you're going to send it to me, but
Read that paper
I'm so
down.
excited.
I want people to know it's not one thing or another. It's the connectivity that we need to teach. I sound like Ronald Reagan, though. Read my lips. Read my paper. Oh my God.
One more question. What is one skill children need more of today than 20 years ago?
The ability to be very careful about the use of social media and technological devices. So the answer in a one word or connected word would be digital wisdom.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you so much.
Thank you
Amazing.
both. Thank
We
you both.
really
And now I'm going to
appreciate
go. I shouldn't do this online, but I'll just say thank you both. It's such a pleasure to be back with the duo.
It is wonderful to be with you.
And please, I want my son, my son who's working on Ravo, to hear the two of you in this conversation. I think he will really be so happy.
He was behind us the whole time at IDA.
I was going to say, you met him, so he will know who you are, and I want him to have
He sent me and Greg home with all the candy from the booth.
Oh, is that?
So it's at my center, and I'm like, that's from Dr. Wolf.
Oh, that's so cute. Oh, can you just send that to him, the podcast? Because otherwise I'll forget.
I'll find him, and if I don't, I'll get a hold of Dorlin. And
okay,
she'll do
actually, what I'll do, I'm going to send the Shanker paper right now to you, and I'll put his name. I'll say Aimee and Melissa will send you a copy, and he'll put it on the Needle Learning website so that you guys are with us.
Oh, nice. Thank you.
Okay.
So this is Aimee,
And Melissa.
and we're the Dyslexia
Trio.
today.
Happy to be a part of a trio.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
The Dyslexia Duo hosts are
Melissa Dean,
and Aimee Rodenroth. The producer is Greg Rodenroth.
Dyslexia awareness is so important. Please share with your friends, family, and anyone who needs to know more about dyslexia.
Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and X at the Dyslexia Duo.
Thanks for listening.
Bye.